So this is going to be a conversation. Gina and I are going to have a chat. We're going to talk about grief. I want it to be an open conversation too. So if someone has, sometimes we wait till the end of these things to ask questions, but I want you to ask questions, raise your hand, speak up. Is it doing okay? Oh, Gina.
Oh.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I want this to be a conversation amongst all of us because I think really we all experience grief. Grief is collective, grief is individual. We're useless alone. So let's remember that while we're here today. So we're all here because this lovely human wrote this lovely book called Moving On Doesn't Mean Letting Go. Gina Moffa is a grief therapist based in New York City, big city gal. And we're going to have a conversation. So the first question I have for you, Gina Moffa, is how are you feeling?
It's so weird to be a therapist and hear that question. I'm always nervous to be in front of people, but what I'm grateful for is that this book has led me to make connections with other humans and hear stories and be heart to heart in a way that I would never have been able to. And so I try to put my nerves aside and say, I'm incredibly grateful. I'm feeling so incredibly grateful to be here. And thank you, Sam and Mike and Noan and everybody here who actually spent some of your Saturday. Thank you for spending some of your Saturday here with us. So that's my short answer.
I love it. How are you all feeling? Good. So? That's all right. All feelings are valid. So this book, I want to get into the inspiration for it, but let's talk about the title. Like when you hear that, what does that mean? Moving on doesn't mean letting go. What does that mean?
So I'm a New Yorker, so I'm a little snarky from time to time. You may or may not get that version of me today, but I have a private practice in New York, and so many people come to me with grief, whether it's fresh grief or whether it's many years. Nobody understands that grief does not have a time limit, and we are always grieving, and it comes up all the time. And so, one of the things people will say is, so-and-so says I have to move on. They tell me to let it go. And I'm saying that's not mutually exclusive. We can move forward. We never move on. We move forward with the people we love, with our losses. We never let go. And so the title of this book is a snarky response to our incredibly grief illiterate society that is always pressuring us to be on its own time, on its own time limit and its own clock, to say, this is my loss, and my loss has meaning. My loss is valid, and I will forever grieve because I loved this person, and love is forever. And relationships don't die. Relationships don't die, and love doesn't die. And so, as cliche as that is, it felt important to me to say, moving on doesn't mean letting go. And just in the title is a message alone to society. So that was really my inspiration.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I think what certainly is true about our culture, our society, is that we want to move past the thing that's hard or a struggle, right? Bypass it, ignore it, diminish it in some way. And I think real healing happens in opening our hearts to it, right? And that comes with vulnerability and fear and isolation and loneliness. But that's why we write books. That's why we bring people together like this, so we can work through it together, right?
Absolutely. And I live in New York. I said it 7 times. You already know that. But I'm sorry. Oh, it's so boring. But I hear all the time also, it's like, and you must understand this in California, this good vibes only. It's always good vibes only. Everyone has t-shirts with it. Everyone's like, sparkles, and everything is shiny and new, and like, let's keep it moving. And at the end of the day, I'm not against spirituality, but I am really big into using it as a way to comfort and tend to and be a part of and engage with, as opposed to all of the spiritual and emotional bypassing that this society has pushed us into. So I'm not all good vibes only. I'm real vibes. And sometimes I'm the human real vibes. And grief is real. And we can't bypass that. We're never going to be able to just, you know, think of the positive things and not feel the bittersweetness along with it. Anyone who's grieved in this room knows that you can think of wonderful times, and along with it will be a longing and a yearning and a missing. And that is a reality that only a griever will understand. And I don't wish that on anybody, and yet all of us will be there. So we should all learn ahead of time. Don't run.
Why do you think we do that? I mean, is it, it's never simple, but is one of the core of it this fear of uh, sitting in discomfort?
Can I blame capitalism?
For sure.
I say that because I think that we've been brought up to be productive and to always be on the go. Like we're a society of winners, and no, nothing is really important unless you're first place or you've done something really remarkable. But we're really just a society of keep it moving and always produce, and it's the bottom line. And I think that because of that, given you know we haven't given the attention, we haven't given the tenderness to something like grief, which, as I said earlier, doesn't have a timeline, right? And if it doesn't have a timeline, then we don't know how long it's going to take you to start producing again and being an active member of society. And it makes people really uncomfortable. And this is losses of all kinds, by the way. This isn't just death loss. This is divorce. This is, loss of livelihood, loss of jobs, loss of your home. That stays with us. And it's really important. People are just really uncomfortable with feelings because we don't know how long they will last. And we don't know, we haven't been taught how to support other people. So if we haven't been taught how to support ourselves and we haven't been taught how to support other people, then we just keep looking at our clock, and there's capitalism. Keep producing.
Capitalism
Long-winded.
is evil. And also, so right. I think what has been true for me is that the hardest things in my life have borne the deepest beauties and the more profound friendships and connections that I've had in life, because I've allowed myself to open myself up to it, right? And while that is challenging, while that is hard, it's meaningful. So one of the attributes of your book is connection, and you said something. I'll just read it here. I have notes because I have the memory of a goldfish. Authentic connection can be the bomb we work into the cracks of our hearts when we are in the midst of our deepest grief. I know for me, as someone who has struggled with depression his whole life and suicidal ideation, all of that sort of thing, connection has been a big healer for me. Community, right? What do you feel are the tools to help us foster that kind of connection? How do we create that kind of connection? And why does it matter?
I say that connection matters because we need to be witnessed. If we aren't witnessed by another human heart, we tend to be isolated. And when we're isolated, things grow in the dark, right? It's like things get bigger somehow if we don't bring them to light. And, as a therapist, I say I could have training and all of these things. It doesn't matter if you don't connect with me, it doesn't matter if you don't feel safe. And so, I talk a lot in my book about the idea of safety. And I can't define what feels safe to anybody, right? Everyone has their own definition of what feels safe to them based on how you've grown up or, you know, a lot of different factors. But if we don't feel safe and we don't feel like there's a mirror with another human heart to our own, there's really nowhere to go except to be in that sense of aloneness. And that's where all of the things just feel untenable and they grow and they just feel like we'll never get through them. So for me, I've seen miracles happen when people come together with other people who are authentic, who are also vulnerable. Because when we're vulnerable, we give permission for other people to be vulnerable. And there's so much curating in the world these days. Instagram, I mean, I do it, but I'm also real, right? And there's so much of us trying to be what we think other people want us to be or whatever, and that we're afraid to show our hearts to one another. But I think we're all here together right now. I invite you to be, heart to heart. That's, whether it's we share stories now or we share them later, there's healing in that. And there's powerful healing in that. I mean, I don't know that I could have written this book if I didn't believe in the power of community and connectedness as the sole source of healing. And it's tough because people are afraid that people may not understand, or maybe sometimes we're afraid to move forward and connect with other people because it will mean leaving something else behind. And if we try to heal, are we betraying our loss? And so it can be really complicated in some ways. But I couldn't do my work if I didn't believe in the connectedness and the power of it. I really couldn't.
Yeah.
So
It
I
gives
think I
us,
answered you.
you did adequately. Yeah.
Never know with me. I'm tangential.
I,
Forgive me in advance.
I mean, connection gives us perspective, right? It allows us to, I mean, when we're in suffering, when we're in pain, it's very easy to center ourselves in the experience, understandably, and feel like nobody will ever understand, right? Nobody can understand, and then we isolate further, right? And when we can open ourselves up, it allows us to, yeah, gain perspective, see other ways in which we can heal and find commonality, right? We're mirrors for each other, is the reality. And um, that's why I love books, because books do that too. Yeah. So one of the things I think we're doing here is normalizing grief, which is a big part of grief literacy, right? It's this idea that we all experience grief, whether that's the loss of someone in your life or the loss of a friendship, or um, I know for me, I've experienced it in my life in terms of childhood, right? Think like the loss of like a childhood I wanted, right? And that I still sort of dream about sometimes, right? So we've all experienced grief. This is a thing we should all talk about. Like, tell me why, like from your perspective as a grief therapist, why the literacy piece is a crucial part of this collective healing that we're referring to.
I think that grief literacy is everything, right? How do we show up for each other? Is there anyone in this room who will not have gone through loss? Because, yes, tell me more. Of any kind, right? I say this a lot, and it's sort of, I say it jokingly, but it's true, is that to live is to grieve. Whether it is, watching our children grow up or moving on to another stage of life, um, it's all grieving, but we aren't taught to look at it that way. We're taught to keep, when we're young, we can't wait to be older. We can't wait to get our car or to graduate high school and become adults. And then when we are, we're like, why? Why did we ever want that? And the time goes so fast, right? They say the days are slow, but the years are fast. But that was a tangent. But at the end of the day, the grief is so much a part of our lives and our society. um, I think it's laughable that we don't have more grief informed healthcare or grief informed education or the corporate world or a grief informed leadership. I talk about this a lot when I'm out in the world being Gina, because the fact that we have 3 days of bereavement leave in some companies, and then you come back and you're expected to just be yourself. And worse, that companies get to decide what the important losses are. Well, if it's an immediate loss, you get 5 days. If it's a pet, you get nothing. And look, who in here has a pet that is more important than most people in your life? Yeah, thank you. It's everything, right? And so the idea of being more grief informed is that we get to decide what our important losses are, and we get to decide how we grieve them. We get to decide how we honor those losses. And by the way, grief is a full body experience. Full body experience. Let me say that again. It will affect your body in ways that you will not see coming. I'd love to talk more about that, known, if it's in there, if it's in your questions.
Doesn't matter.
But we're forced to go back to work or forced to go back to our lives, and some of us have brain fog, memory loss, inflammation is up, our immune systems are compromised, we're bumping into things maybe more, maybe we're falling down. There's so much happening. When my mother died, I tell this story in the book. In a week, I lost my mother, my job. While I was burying her, my job closed, and they let me know at the cemetery. Came home to my apartment, and there was a notice under the door that my apartment building was sold, and I now had to move in 30 days. I go to my favorite restaurant for solace, only to find out that this restaurant was sold. And that was the last night that they were going to be open. And I thought to myself, okay, this is how it's going to be, right? Like I'm feeling it all at once. And I thought, I'm a grief therapist. I got this. Like, I have the training, I have the tools. No, I thought I was going to stand on this pile of victory with my flag. And I was humbled in ways I have never been humbled in my life. And I wound up in the hospital with pancreatitis. And somehow my insulin levels started dropping. There were so many things happening. And I was rendered like I had just had to surrender. And I go to my doctor, and I am answering your question, believe me. I'm circling around. I go to the doctor, and he said, well, when did your mom die? And I said, a few weeks ago. Oh, you're okay then. It's not that. And I said, you know what? Thank you for saying that, because now I know that I am not feeling my feelings. I am feeling nothing. And I just keep going and moving and running and doing and being for other people and going back to work now, and nothing was being dealt with, and it was knocking on my door, and it was my immune system, and it was just something that I learned and was humbled by very quickly. And so to understand that my own doctor put a time limit on my grief and did not think that I should be still upset that I lost my mother a few weeks out was mind-blowing to me. And it spoke so much of this society that we live in, that whether it's capitalism, I say that because it's the idea that we must be productive and we must get back to normal. And no matter what the loss is, whether it's our golden retriever, our job, our careers, our homes, our livelihoods, a divorce, a friendship breakup, that somebody else gets to decide how long that upsets us and how long our bodies are supposed to respond is the most egregious thing in humanity, because the grief is the biggest universal human wound there is, whether it is a death loss or something incredibly significant to us. And we, everyone in this room, are affected in a full body way. And so we need to have more grief-informed society, a more grief-informed society. That is the end. That's it. I will fight until my own dying day for that moment. And I need help, by the way. So
We got you.
Thank you. So I think I answered the question, but because it is so much a part of us, it is like, how can we not understand how loss infiltrates and manifests within our entire life and body? How do we just go back to normal? Like, I don't get it. Help me understand. It's bizarre. But here we are.
Here we are. I mean, it makes sense, right? People, the loss of someone, the loss of your mother, right? This is someone who's been in your life, right? This is someone, she's your capital M mother, right? She brought you into the world. It's wrapped up in your identity, right? Your value, your perspective on life, right? We were talking before this, that your parents had you pretty young, and so you had to do a little bit of parenting yourself. And so there's like some enmeshed stuff there. There's like a lot of emotional attachment, right? Like you can't just, none of this stuff is like a switch, right? We can't just turn it off and on. It's way more complex than that. Nothing is binary, right? And so no wonder, like there is no timeline to this stuff, right? There's no switch.
Nope.
Yeah. I want to talk about, you mentioned pancreatitis, the full body piece. Like, help me understand that.
We have 12 systems. We have nurses here. I'm like, anyone want to talk to these systems? Oh, there we are. Like, we have medical people here. I know it. You know, grief is a stress response, period. A significant loss is a trauma to our nervous system, but it is a stressor. It is a major stressor. And it affects all of our 12 systems in some way, especially the nervous system, which is I always call it this little smoke detector that's always, its only job is to keep us alive, the brain. And so it is always searching for danger. And a loss is a big danger. And it will then infiltrate all of the other 12 systems or the other 11 systems. It will start talking to them. We are in crisis mode. And so that will affect our immune system. It will affect our circulatory system. We've all heard of broken-hearted syndrome, right? It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And it happens more often than we know. Whether it's my own organ or whether it was, my autoimmune response that I didn't know I had being triggered by grief. A lot of it is so much cognitive as well that we don't really think about. Does anyone remember after a major loss, like what happened right after? Because I don't. I remember things to a T, but ask me who was at my mom's funeral. I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you what I did after. I don't even know how I got another job, but it happened back. And so, I say to people, don't pressure yourself if you can't remember things, because this is all grief. There's grief brain, there's grief body. And, one of the things I say the most is right after fresh grief, the most important thing, and sometimes people make fun of me. They're like, why are you saying that? I say the most important thing is to take care of your body, to make sure that you're drinking enough water. Sounds easy, right? But do we do it? Make sure that you're eating protein and nourishing your body. Make sure that you're resting. Make sure that even if you can't sleep, sometimes we sleep too much. Sometimes we don't sleep enough. Sometimes we have no libido. Sometimes we find that we want to have more, we're more awakened. It's a mystery. And grief takes endurance. And that is one of the lessons that I learned the hard way, is that your body is going to take the hit. You think that it's all emotional, right? I was taught to think that grief was happening from the neck up. It was just sad, angry. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, whom I love and thank God for her, but she created the 5 stages of grief for the terminally ill, not for grievers. What it did, though, is it gave us a jumping off point to understand some of the things that can happen. So I love it as a little bit of a structure to start. And then there's no stages, right? We cycle through, we spiral. I say I circle the drain. But first and foremost, it happens in the body, and it is a very physical experience. And that's one of the things that I think takes people by surprise when they're going through a loss of any kind. Even a divorce, I have clients who come in, they've lost, 30 pounds. I don't know why. Well, really? You're going through a major loss. You're in a major stressor right now. And this is how the body is reacting. And, the fact that we actually don't know that about grief, when anybody has read my book and they're like, wow, that was so surprising. You have a chapter just on the body. And it's like, I'm shocked I only have a chapter on the body with how much that feels important to me to talk about. But I always say, no matter where you are, especially right after a loss, first and foremost, take care of your body. If you can get sunshine, if you can take a walk around the block, do it. And the water piece was something I didn't get enough of. So sometimes I just say it's not self-care, it's survival care. And that's what I have to say about the body.
And that is that. No, I love it. It's a reminder that our physical body, our emotional, it's all connected, right? We can't isolate one from the other, right? As a culture, we tend to, maybe overvalue our physical health over our mental health, as an example, right? Yeah. I want to get into the sort of do's and don'ts of what to say and what not to say to someone who is in grief. I'm sure you've probably all heard the what is it? They're in a better place now. Don't do that. Don't say that, right? Why don't we say that? Why don't we say that to someone who's grieving?
The better place is with us.
There you go. Yeah.
The better place is with us. Um, and also, everyone has a different idea of what that better place is. But um, I have another chapter on just platitudes. And look, there's no shade. I could say it a million times, we were never taught how to grieve. And so, how can we then be there for other people going through grief? And I say that with respect and love and compassion, right? And yet, we still don't know better. And so, I'll use my own loss as an example. My mother dies. A very dear friend of mine decided to just write on my Facebook wall, "Heaven just got another angle." And of course, I'm like, "You couldn't even spell check it? You couldn't even spell check it. At least call her an angel." I mean, she is an angle, I suppose, but
Was it a right angle? Was it a left angle?
Was it a left angle? And I was so angry, I'll tell you. You couldn't be bothered to reach out to me. Instead, you write on Facebook and you couldn't even spell check it. And so I write about, you'll read about that in my book, although I attribute it to a client because I was so mad. Um, and at the end of the day, this is just kind of a similar thing, right? No matter what we've been through, it's you know, whether it's heaven got another angle, they're in a better place. Thank God they're not suffering anymore. And look, you've all heard them. And the truth is, do they ever touch you? Do they ever actually infiltrate your pain? Because at the end of the day, what we really need is for people to show up as them. But people get weird, and it's like we've already gone through something life altering, and now you've come and you're saying something that's really bizarre, and it's not who you are. And I'm supposed to connect with that whilst I feel like I'm on another planet with no map and no structure. I have no idea what's next. I'm in my grief fall, and I don't know where I'm going to land and what that's going to look like. And now you're saying something that is also alien. So now I'm on an alien planet with alien friends, and I'm connected to no one. And I'm isolated and alone, and no one understands what's happening with me. And I don't understand what's happening with me. And now I'm further isolated and alone, and I just want to be alone. Because if I have to hear that BS, I don't want to hear it. I'd rather be alone than have somebody say, they're in a better place. You'll be okay tomorrow. That's one that happens all the time.
You just spoke 5 of them.
I hear this one a lot. There are no words. And I think, or I can't imagine. You hear that one a lot. And look, it's again, I have compassion because I know they mean well. And I know that it's a bigger problem with society. And I always say then, the words would be, I'm here. This sucks. This will never be okay. But I'm here with you through it all. And yet, who in this room would be kind of scared to say that? A lot of people would be, maybe not you guys, because you're here and you're smart and wonderful, and aware. But a lot of people don't feel comfortable saying that. So they say nothing, or they say something like this, or they say, I can't imagine your loss. I can't imagine what you're going through. Really, you're very lucky that you can't imagine what I'm going through, but one day you will. Because none of us are getting out. I said it before. Somebody said, oh, that's morbid. None of us are getting out of here alive. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Joy. Joy's like, oh, that was big. But it's true.
It's the one thing we all have in common, right?
We all have that in common. So I have this chapter that basically is a letter to people that are in your life. So if they're not saying the right thing, it's here you go. And I'm in there as me saying, hi, person who's supporting, person reading this book. I'm Gina, and I want to thank you for caring. But here are the things you should be saying, or here's what you can do. I'm in the camp of like, it's better to do than to talk. But if we don't live near people, it's not always easy. I love food. I love tasks. But if we can't do that, just being honest and saying, wow, this really sucks. I'm here. You're going through a time that is, horrific and life-changing, and you shouldn't be alone. And I'm going to sit with you, and I'm going to come over, and I'm going to text and check on you, and whether or not you want to respond, it's okay, but I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm going to be me most of all. And so if I'm one of your snarky, sarcastic New York friends, I may throw in a little snark and sarcasm just so you know that I'm me. Because I think that we forget that we need the consistency as well. And so yeah, so if anybody wants to pick up my book and go to the Platitude Trap, it is called the Platitude Trap because it's people who want to connect and people who want to be connected to or with, and nothing is happening because somebody's afraid to say the thing and somebody doesn't know what to say back, right? And so two people fall in a trap and there's no connection. And so if we can just be ourselves and or do something, I'm really good about the food. If they're people you're not close to but you care, I love getting a card in the mail. And even if it just says, I'm thinking of you, you're on my mind, I care. You know, when people say, how are you after a loss, it's also hard. How are you? How do you think I am? My whole life just fell apart. But I can't say that. And I don't. And I'm like, I'm terrible, but thank you for thinking of me, but the thinking of you part is really it. Um, yeah, that's the most important thing. Just the authenticity.
Yeah, showing up as you.
Showing up as you and just showing up and keep showing up and don't stop showing up and never being the person who's so afraid to say the wrong thing that nothing is said. Because that is the most painful. Yeah.
And there's a reason we do that, right? There's a reason you mentioned the compassion and then the societal piece, right? Where it goes back to the fear and the discomfort of being vulnerable, right? It's hard to be witness to suffering, right? It's hard to be witness to pain. And we have to do it, right? If we're gonna grow, right? Yeah. So we started this conversation talking about like the various types of grief, and we're all sort of united in grief, and we're having this conversation to normalize said grief. I want to open this up right to the audience here to talk about the various types of grief that we've all experienced, as a way to connect us, as a way to remind ourselves that we're not alone, right? So again, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet, the loss of a friend, the loss, you mentioned a house, a favorite restaurant. These are all valid forms of grief.
Loss of identity.
Loss of identity.
After things, loss of purpose. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I can go on. I do list them. I keep saying this. I'm sorry to. I'm like, it's in my book, but yeah.
I know we're recording this, so this may not work for the people watching. So I'm sorry about that, but I want to open it up to all of you. If anyone wants to share something they've grieved in their life, small, big, yes. Oh,
well, we'll just repeat your question back.
Yeah, we'll repeat it. Yeah.
And so what you were saying about it being in the body, you just recently about maybe 3 months ago, bone hurting. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, is it my age? Am I, like something I'm eating, right? And those things have happened, right? Changes have happened. But I think just hearing that, and knowing that like this is just my body feeling it, you're too, It's hard. I still say see a doctor. Yeah. I never say it's just grief. Yeah. If it's the pain is as deep as your bones. I'm really sorry. I mean, I say this, and it still doesn't infiltrate to even say I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry, right? And I mean, as somebody who's lost somebody, it's kind of like, wow, that happened. Somebody is saying I'm sorry for my major loss, and it doesn't feel real. Yeah. No,
I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you're here. Yeah.
I'm asking this question because of something that happened in the last couple of weeks with me. Is there a healthy level of grief?
You're asking if there's a heavy level of grief. I'm asking for
Healthy level of grief.
I think that all levels of grief are healthy. And I'll
So I visit. I've seen a lot of my parents die and a lot of people die, brothers and sisters and so on. But a friend came to visit me for a couple of weeks. He didn't start one. We didn't have one conversation where he didn't talk about his dead wife who died 6 years ago. And he's retired, but he's frozen in time with that he's prostrate with grief. He cannot get by it, and he knows he has to. We talked about it. He can't move on physically, emotionally, and he doesn't do it. He lives in a beautiful house, but he stays there. He can't volunteer. Anyway, I've said enough, but what's your idea about that?
I mean, I still have a lot of questions. Yeah. So this gentleman was saying that he has a friend who has been grieving his wife for 6 years, and it's all he talks about, and he feels as if he's stuck in time and isn't able to move forward. And my question is, does he have friends with whom he's out and doing things? Is he isolated? And the question was, is there a healthy level of grief? And what I say to that is that it's tricky because, there's this new diagnosis out there, which in a way pathologizes some versions of grief. And I'm a little bit on the fence with it because I also believe that it's great that we have research out there and attention on grief, but the diagnosis is prolonged grief disorder. I'm not saying he has this. Yes. Why they created this was because there would be a time, and I don't agree with like the timeline. I think it's 18 months. So I don't believe in that. But what I think is important is that it puts some of the emphasis on resources like peer support and how isolated we are. And if there's such a thing happening like rumination, if it's kind of all that this person can talk about and think about, if there's magical thinking, like if only I should have, I would have. If that is kind of the cycle that this person is going through, I would say that it could be time for professional support in different ways. And that is sort of the point of this diagnosis in a lot of ways, because there are times that grief can really snowball into mental health challenges. And there are these moments where extra mental health support, whether it is, treatment methods, psychotherapy, group therapy, all of the above, medications, whatever may be needed. And I'm not sure because I don't have a lot of details of him, could be useful. So, I think, in a normal scheme of life, I would say that 6 years and still being grief stricken is okay. But my caveat is if they're isolating and if it's the rumination and the inability to sort of do the everyday activities, then I think that I would say my clinical support would be to get professional support just to see what else might be going on. And so that's what I would say. But I would also say that it's a slippery slope and it's tricky because I never want to pathologize grief itself. It's a human wound. But there are instances where it can really kind of become something bigger. So I'm not sure if I've helped you with that, but
I'm here today for that reason.
okay.
Because of him.
Oh,
I'm just wondering, like, he doesn't get a lot of support, so I'm wondering,
okay.
would be sending your book.
A gentle nudge is you, okay, maybe sending him my book, but also continuing to be there for him and to show up and saying, let's do something together. Maybe we take a trip. Maybe there's a guy's trip you can take, something that can keep him in the loop of life. I think we can sometimes hit pause on our life and get stuck in that moment because we don't want to lose that person and we don't want to lose those memories. And a lot of people don't want to move forward because you're leaving something or someone behind. And that's where I say we don't understand the idea of honoring our love by bringing them with us. I call my mom my sidekick. We go on all sorts of adventures. I do things that she'd never, got a chance to do. And it feels like I'm taking her with me. I don't think I could have written this book without her, frankly. But that's me, right? That's a personal way of bringing somebody with me. But I think
People were with me.
oh, good. You're not crazy. Oh my gosh, my mom, poor thing, she's always working. I keep her working. I'm like, one more thing, mom. Wait, can you help me get through this event at Arvida today? No, but I'm like, I'm sorry. I know I'll let you relax. It's true. I'm laughing, but I do. I talk to her a lot. Um, but we all have our own ways of keeping people with us, and it may look different for everyone. I talk about different ways. But really, the ultimate thing is the bringing with and the continuing on. And so I obviously wish the best for your friend, and I hope that your friend sees this in some way. Um, thank you for being a good friend. Thank you for being a good friend, because I don't know anybody that would go to something to help and to be a support for somebody. That's really wonderful. So
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I want a friend like you.
There's no answer. You have to do something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Through my life, a lot of different therapy stuff from my injuries, and it seems like what I learned was the idea for me to remember in my mind the idea that my heart is there and it keeps on cracking and letting a little bit more, and then still keep on trying to take steps. Don't really have it yet, and then it happens a different way. And it's defined with the therapist as, oh, you got the crack closed again. So you got to keep. So it's really been helpful for me where I'm at to learn basics again, and that's been what I'm understanding. I think from your book is just being able to grab on something to go forward, because that's all it's about. Is you got to take steps. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that. I agree. It is sort of, I talk in the beginning of my book about a grief fall, and it is something that I came up with because we've all had that moment where life is never the same. Whether it's an accident or a diagnosis or a breakup or a death, it is that moment where we find that we're just free falling, and we have no idea where we will land, if we will land, how we will land, what we will hit on the way down. And we land in a place that we've not prepared for, we could never imagine being in. And now we're expected to just go forward, just like normal. And so to me, once we finally do land and we're in this place and we're able to then contend with all of the losses that come along the way, something that I'm thinking with you is a lot of secondary losses that come one after the other and pile up. This loss leads to this loss, which leads to this loss, which leads to this change. And we don't acknowledge that enough. And we don't acknowledge that one loss leads to so many others. And that to keep going is it also means to contend with all of the little losses along the way and try as hard as we can to find the glimmers, the little moments we can hold on to that remind us that we can take another step, or that the light is coming a little bit at a time, usually in the form of people or good moments or little triumphs that we didn't see coming, things that pop up that are unexpected blessings. And it's being aware of them, because it's easy to not be aware of them.
My wife does a very good job keeping aware, so
Good job. Not easy. It's not easy. It's not. So thank you. Thank you for being here too. And we keep going, looking for those glimmers. That's all we can do, while acknowledging all of the pain too. So thank you for being here. Thank you. I'm sorry, before I forget. Hi.
just wanted to say that what you said about what happened with your mother and your job at the time, that really spoke to me because I had something similar happen. Okay, that's sorry. So I totally felt that when you were talking about it, how poor our heart is. It happened to me almost 15 years ago. You can see it still upsets me thinking about it. But I am trying to. I'm going to school now to become a therapist myself, and partly what inspired me was what the loss that I went through and how much therapy helped me. But I find that it's really difficult sometimes to hear about people experiencing something that and I wonder, how do you keep your heart open so you can continue to receive this grief that your clients give you, and to hear all these painful things, and still go about your day and feed your cat?
If only I had a cat. I'm sorry that you understand the multiple losses that happen, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you. What's so interesting is I've been doing this 20 years, and I don't think I could keep doing it if I didn't see the joy that sneaks in, or the moments of triumph, of people thinking they couldn't do something and then they do. If days where they say, wow, I laughed today. I didn't think I would do that. I can't believe I smiled. I had a good time at this event I didn't even want to go to. I opened my heart to someone today. I was affected by something. If I didn't know that that was possible, and if I didn't see it, I don't think I could do this work. I really don't. But I am blessed to see joy come through even when we don't want it to. I'm a traveling companion with people, and to be able to take that sacred journey with the hardest moments of people's lives is the most humbling thing that I could ever imagine doing in this life. And yeah, I don't know how I got into this crazy work, but I do feel like I was called, I was pushed into it, and it's filled with beauty and realness. I don't just work with people who are having a bad day. I'm working with people who are in the trenches of anguish and despair like nothing they have ever imagined experiencing. And grief is the ultimate wailing and hollowing out in so many ways of who we are. It is the ultimate transformation. There's no transformation like loss. There just isn't. We are never the same, for better and worse together. And if I couldn't see that better, I couldn't do it. It wasn't easy going through my own loss. And then, I became very quickly, somehow got scooped up to be the director of an outpatient mental health program in New York, while also having a private practice. And it was really hard, but I was granted really beautiful people in my life. And I call them my angels in the book, because I somehow was their boss and
Your
running
angles.
my angles. They were my angles. But I was their boss, but they saved me. We were a community, and it really showed me again the power of community. But when I hear stories of people losing their mother, my heart bursts. It just breaks open. And it's really any major loss, a child, a sibling. I mean, every loss is so important. Every loss is so huge. And to be there and witness it's different. You need a little space from it, because it is their loss. But my heart can feel that loss of my mother every time, because I'm human and all of that. But at the same time, yeah, I guess that's my long answer, is somehow if you're called in that way, you are able to know that we as humans are capable of healing, and we're capable of letting in the good again. It's a choice sometimes. And the choice is not just to be happy, but the choice is to use whatever tools we have and whatever people we have to try to get there. But it's hard. I can't be Pollyanna about it, you know. It's it's a hard thing to be human. And it's a hard thing to be human and go through loss and major losses after the other in different ways and still try to be a human who's good and shows up in the world and has friends and can be empathetic. It's hard. You know, we all have days where it's like, I can't do this. And yet there's always another day. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I really would like to see you as a colleague. If grief speaks to you, find me. We'll talk. Thank you, though.
I always say with big love comes big grief, and I wouldn't have it any other way, right? I mean, that's facing the world with an open heart, and that's opening yourself up to get hurt. But the big heart allows me to be a better friend, a better partner, more open with my animals, you know, more vulnerable, more loving, more curious, softer. And I, you know, I experience pain and suffering all at once. You know, the thing about being human is that we have the capacity to hold it all. We can be many things at once, the hard and the good, and everything in between, right? Because there's no binary. We have about 10 minutes. Jessica.
Did you talk about like comparative grief, or especially between family members, like this feeling of their grief is almost overtaking your grief, right? Kind of thing, and how that's
Comparative grief and how we face that.
Thank you. I know it always feels like we're in the grief Olympics with family. That competition, it always feels like my grief is worse. It's tough. And not to use another example, but on Mother's Day, my father's always really sad. I'll let that sit there. And
What an a-hole.
doesn't oh. But but that's my point, is that sometimes we're so in our grief that we can't see that there's something else for the people around us. And you know, one of the things I always say is to still share, whether it's at a holiday table when everybody's really sad because the holidays and birthdays and days of meaning and anniversaries, whatever it is, and people are at a table talking about their loss, you know, that it's actually okay to say, I miss them too. This day is important to me too, because X, Y, and Z, and to keep on sharing. I think we get into trouble when we start to say, well, you know, it's my loss too. And, you know, this isn't just your day. This is not just about you, right? But like, obviously, little Gina would like to say, you know what? Like, Mother's Day can be mine because it was my mother. She wasn't your mother. I don't say that though, but because I know that he's hurting and I know that every day is a loss for him. And so, you know, and yet there's always that blessed yet, you know, to say, yeah, me too. This is a hard day because of this other memory that I have, and whatever it may be for you. But it is hard. And I talk about it a lot in the book, that it's hard to do that compare and despair, because it's not really despair, but compare to despair. Because it is not the Olympics, and everybody is able to have their own experience, and everyone has a different loss and a different relationship to the loss, because everyone has a different relationship to the person that they've lost. And so everybody will have their own unique experience, and that has to be just validated in some way. But it can be hard when we're in the thick of it. And that's where compassion comes in, and the blessed me too, you know, in whatever way feels safe. But hopefully we have people in our lives with whom we can share those other feelings too. I know my father's not somebody I can go to with my grief. So I go to other people that I can also feel care or feel sacred with. And when we don't process our grief, it waits for us. Absolutely. And well said, Mo. And it'll wait a long time. I have somebody I work with that lost her mother about 30 years ago, and was a financial, works on Wall Street person, came in, is like, I can't do this anymore. I lost my mother and I've never cried and I've never felt it. And now it's time. And I don't know the backstory as to why. I mean, I do, but I didn't at the time. And so it waits, it will be there. Sometimes it comes out in our body. A lot of times it'll come out in our body, but we learn to live with things as humans. How many of us have these aches that just show up? We learn to live with it. And that's sad. But we sort of, we'll have one limp and we'll just compensate for it by putting weight on the other foot, and that's kind of how grief is sometimes. But yeah.
People categorize, well, that was just a dog. The feelings are still the same regardless, and it's like,
Yeah.
come on now.
Don't get me started on pet loss.
Yeah.
I know. And then we're a country of dog people or pet people, and we still don't seem to acknowledge the depth of grief that can stay with us after losing a pet or having to make the choice to put our pet down, which is unbearable for so many people.
It's the worst. We have about 5 minutes left. So anyone else want to share or ask questions of Gina?
Or take a picture.
Is there research about like children experiencing grief? Because that question was asked about what kind of loss have we experienced. I started writing down things that actually were from my childhood. Because I'm an immigrant, I was born in Peru and came here, and I feel like I lost a lot of things, like really in my family that I was close to. And as a peer support specialist, I work in a mental health clinic. So just want to help normalize grief as well. And I want to know how I can do that. I guess you have said like being there with the person, being present, but as a professional, how can I do that?
Are you working with kids? Thank you for your work, by the way.
But I would like to in the future.
Oh, great. Kathy, this is something, if you want to, I co-authored a children's book called Zara's Big Messy Goodbye during the pandemic as a way to help parents and teachers and caregivers be able to talk to children about loss. One of the things I say often, I co-authored this with a dear friend of mine, Rebecca Barucki, who has a series, by the way, about this one character who goes through messy things and always comes out learning great lessons. This one in particular, I was really humbled to work with because I feel, as you guys may know already, really passionate about grief. Yay. But that we can teach children young, right? We're kind of all far gone. We're learning as we go. We're learning as we grieve. But children have the opportunity when they're young to not be afraid of their feelings and not run away from them, not try to good vibes only them. But our language in particular has to be really spot on with children. First and foremost, we absolutely have to speak to them age appropriately, but we can't say somebody has gone away, somebody has gone to sleep. It can't be any language that is not they died, because it is really confusing for kids. And so if we say they went to sleep and now, so and so Gus the toad has gone to sleep, now, Uncle Bob has gone to sleep, and now what? Like, are they going to wake up? Or if somebody goes to sleep, a child won't want to go to sleep. And so we're instilling a lot of anxiety and fear around death, the idea of it. So I say age appropriately, it's really important to be honest. And also, even for us as parents and adults, to be as honest as we can with our kids about what we're experiencing. There's no shame in feeling grief, and there's no shame in feeling sadness or anger or whatever emotion you may be feeling. So many people go in the shower to cry. They want to shield their kids from any emotion. But I think there's so much good, and it's so healthy to be able to say, mommy is sad because X, Y, and Z happened. But, also I talk to someone about it and I get support. Or even if somebody is taking medication, mommy is sad and mommy takes medication to help. It's important to really try to normalize mental health care for kids. And that means being honest. And again, you're not going to tell a 3-year-old that, you're feeling suicidal or anything, but I think it's important age appropriately to use words that are clear, that don't scare them, and that can help them understand what death is. And what grief is, and how to, and most of all, this is all really so that they're not afraid of their emotions. Because kids can experience grief in very different ways than adults can, and it can be confusing for adults too. If the child doesn't seem like they're showing emotion, a parent may think that they're not grieving, or maybe they're acting out. Maybe they're reverting to younger year behaviors and regressing in some way, and a parent may not attribute that to grief. And so it's just really important that we are honest with our kids, but also always inquiring on how they're feeling, giving them the space to talk about it. And that can even mean the time of day that you talk to your kids, right? I have people who are like, I talk to them in the car on the way to school. And I'm like, no, that's a terrible time to talk to them. Like, you need time and space. You need to give, you can't be rushing, and there can't be anything else happening. So I don't know if that helps what you're doing, but working with kids, whether it's through grief, whether it's through trauma, whether it's through anything else, is really about not just scaring them in any way, helping them find tools, but also being as honest as possible based on their age and emotional development.
Thank you. And we have to wrap it up.
Oh, no.
So if they have more of this, make sure you buy Gina's book. And I'm sure she's going to hang out after to chat. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
Let's give a round of applause for Gina.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Noan, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Like, this is such a joy. I can't even believe that all of you are here to talk about grief. Like, this just makes my dreams come true, which is weird to say. But thank you. Thank you for being here so much. And if you do buy this, it is really, I like to think of it as a way of being in therapy with me. It is as close to grief therapy as possible. During the pandemic, there was just so many people calling me in a state of panic, and there are not that many grief therapists out there. If anyone wants to become one, please help. And so it was important for me to, in some way, try to give access to people who are maybe in places that they either couldn't afford grief therapy, or they were in a place where there wasn't a grief therapist. And yes, it's only a book, but this is 20 years of my research, education, and training in grief. And this is what I do in my practice. Of course, it doesn't hit everybody's grief experience, but my hope is it's at least a start, something you can either bring to therapy or use yourself. And I'm with you in these pages. So it's kind of lame to say that, but my heart is really in these pages. And I hope everybody here will at least stay in touch with me in some way: Instagram, email, website, all of it. And maybe I'll see you again. But my heart is with you, and I'm so entirely grateful. Thank you to be here and to be with you. And thank you, Sam. And thank you, Noan. And thank you all.